related to the solicitation, please put that in the chat function itself too. And then at the end of this PowerPoint presentation, we'll go through the questions. And also please know if we can't answer your question today, that we will respond to all the questions that were posted today in writing and post them as an addendum in the web portal for the solicitation. So next slide, please.
Jeff, do you want to remind everybody that we're also going to record this?
Oh, okay. And have you started that?
I just started.
Okay, perfect. Yes, and also this presentation is being recorded and the video will be posted to the web portal also. All right, so once again, good morning, welcome, and thank you everyone for joining. We're so excited to have you here today. Please note that all requests for information, clarification, or questions must be emailed to the email box noted here throughout this process. And they should be received in accordance with the schedule of events in the solicitation. So just as a reminder of some of the schedule of events, the deadline to submit questions is March 8th, and then hosts will respond to those questions by March 11th by 5 p.m. And those responses, once again, will be posted as an addendum within the web portal. And questions and responses received throughout this event will be published as an addendum on Zengen. So actually, I'm being repetitive. So I know we have a couple other host staff joining us today. So I wanted to give those folks an opportunity to introduce themselves. So why don't we start with Angie?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Angie Nelson, and I'm the Deputy Director for the Department of Housing Stability, overseeing our work in housing stability, so keeping folks in the homes they're in, and homelessness resolution. And look forward to this procurement and future partnership with you all. Thanks.
Riley?
Hi, I'm Riley Cockrell. I'm the Homelessness Outreach Program Officer here at HOST, and also work with the Early Intervention Team, which is a team that does street outreach.
Thank you. Anybody else from HOST on?
I can go. Ebony Santucci here with Contracts and Performance Manager with HOST, and I am part of the procurement team and monitoring functions under operations.
And I think Midori just joined. We're doing introductions, Midori, if you don't mind. Maybe not. All right, let's go to the next slide. So as noted, within the RFP, there's a schedule of events, and those dates are very important. So I just wanted to go over those quickly with those that are participating. So the RFP for safe parking was issued on February 28th. Today, we're doing our virtual pre-proposal conference. Once again, the deadline to submit additional questions after today goes up through March 8th by 12 p.m. So keep in mind that if you have additional questions after our call today, you can submit them to that email box and we will respond in writing. The response to questions will be by March 11th by 5 p.m. We have a pretty quick turnaround time here for proposal due dates. So those are on March 21st by 5 p.m. We tentatively have an evaluation period of March 22nd through the 31st and an anticipated award date of April 1st. So we're looking right now for the remainder of 2021 of a 9-month contract for whoever is awarded. So next slide, please. So the Safe Parking Initiative, the City and County of Denver through HOST is seeking service providers that are interested in providing managed support at city-owned sites and or at sites where providers have documented site access for the operations and services for safe parking for cars and recreational vehicles. And we're also looking for other innovative approaches to temporary shelters and cars and RVs for persons that are experiencing homelessness. HOST anticipates a budget of $150,000 for the initial 9 months of this project. Next slide, please. So let's talk about the qualifications. So we're looking for nonprofit organizations with experience serving individuals that are experiencing homelessness in a trauma-informed and person-centered way. Individuals should have the capacity to manage at least one site that serves passenger vehicles and RVs. We're looking for a provider that can provide connections to housing-focused case management and services. Also, that vendors should be able to procure supplies as part of this contract for basic hygiene services, including portable toilets on site, water, hand washing stations, trash and recycling collection. Our goal is to have a low barrier access to services for individuals, families, individuals that own pets, active substance abuse disorders, behavioral health concerns that prohibit access to other shelter options, and there are no time limits or compulsory services. Next slide, please. Qualifications continued. We're looking for someone that can do an orderly setup, including perimeter fences that are appropriately sized, that comply with public health orders. We also are looking for managed security within the space, the perimeters of the fencing and the surrounding areas. We are looking for a code of conduct and a vendor that can provide an agreement with participants for safe protocols. We also are very interested in looking at data collection and reporting within our HMIS system. And then finally, of course, compliance with laws and regulations and observance of state and public health orders. Next slide, please. So once we receive solicitation proposals, we are looking at an evaluation criteria. So these are at a high level, this is what we're looking at. We're looking at agencies that have experience and the capacity to provide the service. We're looking at their proposed services and making sure that they're in alignment to what we're looking for. Within the RFP itself, there's a series of questions. We're looking at proposers' responses to those questions. We'll do a technical review of proposals to make sure that proposals are in compliance with all the documents that we had asked for. We have specific program outcomes. We're looking to evaluate what those might look like. We have a specific budget. We want to make sure that those are in line with required rules and regulations. Within the RFP, there's specific requirements in regards to a contract. We have to make sure that those provisions are met too, and all other requirements that are applicable. And then also keep in mind that there is no relative weighting to those criteria that we went over. So one of the requirements we talked about is what are the contract requirements? So anybody that signs a contract with the City and County of Denver, they must be registered and in good standing with the Secretary of State. There are specific insurance requirements, and we do request a COI, a certificate of insurance that is part of the agreement itself, which covers workers' compensation, general liability, business auto liability, and then cyber if we're collecting personal identifiable information. Once again, questions will be accepted until March 8th by 12 p.m. And then we will respond by March 11th by that deadline too. It's really important that you, throughout this process, kind of go back to the web portal, log in and see if any addendums have been added. What that has additional information. And also keep in mind, we only accept proposals through this Zengen portal, and we added the link here to gain access for the solicitation itself. So next slide. All right, we're just buzzing through the agenda here today. So for the time remaining, we want to answer any questions that participants might have. Once again, we ask that you put your questions in the chat We'll go through them systematically. After our call today, here's the mailbox, the host procurements@denvergov.org. If you have additional questions, please submit them there, and we'll be looking at those on a regular basis. Also keep in mind that any changes to the RFP or its scope will be posted as an addendum. So that's why it's really important that you go back to the site occasionally to see if anything's been changed. And please do not rely on any oral interpretations for the solicitations. Anything that changes will be posted to the site itself. Okay? All right. Anybody have any questions?
Jeff, there is a question. The RFP mentions the use of Salesforce in HMIS. How is Salesforce used?
Riley, can you answer that question about what the reporting requirements are for programs in Salesforce and HMIS?
Did you want to?
I think let's, I can try this one. So Salesforce is the reporting system used internally by host. And so we have all of our contract partners submit typically quarterly reports into Salesforce, just some basic information about, leverage of funding, some information on household served, things like that. It's sort of a place where we capture the aggregate reporting from HMIS. So you have your HMIS reporting, which is client level. And then from there, you'll get your quarterly kind of summary report available in HMIS. And then in Salesforce is where, as a program, you would say, here's our narrative success, the things we can't capture in HMIS. So here's what's been successful this quarter. Here's what's been challenging. And a few other key domains. And I know Midori's on the call but may not be available to speak. I don't know if there's anything you would add on that, Midori.
No, I can speak. I am in a place where I can speak. Yeah, that it's just the qualitative information. And we use that for all of our programs to gather aggregate information about what's going on. So this isn't just an isolated ask for this particular RFP, but for all of our programs in general.
All right, looks like we have another question. The RFP mentions a 12-month budget, 6-month budget, and 9-month budget. Can you clarify how you want the budget developed?
Yes, apologies for the confusion there. We will clarify that. So we would like to see your full 12-month budget when you make a proposal. So, whatever startup costs are associated and the cost for a full year of operations. And then we tried to clarify, it was initially a 9-month period, and then the realities of city contracting time and when we would really get something running. We shortened that to say, let's pilot, let's start with a 6-month operation window, for the back half of 2022. And so our hopeful initial negotiations will be to look at that 12-month cost and understand, what portion of that can we meet for a 6-month time frame. So let me first just ask Gregory, if that clarifies the question you have.
Yes, I'm sorry, it's Justine. It's my husband's account.
Okay, thank you.
Apologies. I think so, but I think at the beginning of this call, you guys mentioned a 9-month budget. So now I am a little bit confused. So you want the budget to reflect the startup costs in the first year and the operating costs of the first year, but then in the contracting process, what may actually be contracted for is more of a 6 to 9 month, just depending on.
It would be a 6 month to start. The 9-month was a misspeak from an earlier time frame that we had that got changed just before the procurement went live. So
yes,
that was
absolutely understand.
Yeah. And then if it seems confusing, it's because it is. So we recognize and know that $150,000 is what we have available right now through this one funding source of the American Rescue Plan Act. And we know that that's probably not enough to do this on a wide scale, to be able to scale it to the need, to be able to do, 24-hour, like we know there's a lot of things that maybe $150,000 doesn't quite scratch the surface on. And so trying to make it clear that, it's right there in section A1 of the proposal instructions. Applicants are encouraged to submit proposals that demonstrate the full operational need for 12 months of operations. Additional funding may be awarded as need and available resources align. So as we're able to demonstrate, like, here's what we could do for the current funding available, but here's what we could do if we could figure out some more funding, we may be able to go figure out and try and get more funding. So it's kind of a funky ask, we recognize. But that's what we're trying to work towards.
Great, that does help. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Justine.
I got the second one. Oh, yeah.
All right, it looks like we have another question. Two questions. What is the role of a good neighbor agreement in this process?
Hi, Nancy.
I just figured out how to put on the video. I am dressed. Thank you.
Well, thank you. So I'm gonna let someone on the contract team maybe more familiar with where exactly all the language lives in this RFP document. But in general, I can answer that the city doesn't enter into any good neighbor agreements with neighborhoods, but any agency that we'd be working with, would likely look at engaging in that process. I believe that we have a question asking about how you intend to so one of the questions is, please describe how your program will manage, mitigate, and respond to any negative community impacts to neighbors of a safe outdoor space. And so that would probably be a place to talk about any efforts towards good neighbor agreements or experience doing that. The other thing I'd say is so currently there isn't a city-owned site that we're bringing to this, right? Like we don't have, come use this parking lot and we want you to operate. But the city continues to look for those opportunities. And typically in a city lease, so if you were to lease the land, for a nominal fee from the city to operate a safe parking program, typically from the real estate team, those leases require good neighbor agreement to be worked out.
Okay, thank you.
And then anyone else, I'm sorry, I just want to make sure, Jeff, Nicole, Ebony, I don't believe the procurement speaks specifically to good neighbor agreement anywhere else, but wanted to give you the opportunity to confirm that.
Yeah, I don't see it covered
It
anywhere
does.
else.
It does not. No.
Great, thank you.
And then the second question Nancy asked is there any advantage to adding safe parking to existing SOS sites, especially Regis?
I think I can say that in general, we know that there's some basic infrastructure required for both safe outdoor space and safe parking that could be beneficial to leverage, right? And to figure out how to lean on the shared infrastructure within other programs. I don't think that there's an advantage or any preference for that. There's no scoring preference or, that's what we're looking for, but would certainly always recommend that level of collaboration and conversation with other, service provider partners to determine, is there a benefit to kind of joining forces on something versus spreading it out more. I think that question, if that's a direction, a proposed program were to go. I think the question around neighborhood engagement, good neighbor agreements, mitigation becomes pretty critical, because very often those sites that are already in existence have some strong agreements around how many people and what types of things. And so we'd have to revisit that kind of on both ends. But I think, yes, get creative and see how we might tag on to some of the innovative work happening elsewhere in the city.
Thank you.
Rebecca asked, and I think this may have been answered already by Angie at some level, but the question is, does host prefer using city property?
Thanks, Rebecca. So no preference for that. I think, again, we don't currently have a city property to bring to this the table here. So in some ways, you know, if someone has site control or has an agreement with a church or a private landowner that, you know, they're willing to let their property be used for this purpose, I think that's a fast path towards being able to pilot something like this. But you know, the city is really we've put out this procurement because we're trying to figure out how do we scale differently and think differently to meet the needs of people experiencing homelessness in their vehicles. It's a growing challenge across the community. And so with that, you know, if we don't have proposals that provide for private property coming into the equation, you know, then what will that mean for property the city needs to bring forward? But again, we don't have it identified right now. So hopefully that's helpful in answering your question. So to put it simply, there's not a preference.
Yes, that's
Thank
great.
you.
Well, those are all the questions we have in the chat. Any other questions?
I'm trying to type.
Okay. Okay.
So if we have, if we were to propose a site that has started out with only 6 months, an agreement to be in operation for 6 months, would that be acceptable? Or are you really looking for somebody who's setting up something that's ongoing and you have money to pay for the first 6 months? What do you think about, what's your thought on that?
I think we'd entertain all proposals, what
Okay.
what works for the proposer. Yeah, I think we have this current funding source. Like I said, we're working to try and identify additional funding or how else might we scale to meet the need. And so, you know, we imagine that this type of service may be necessary in our community for a while, right? As the impacts of COVID and the economic impacts continue to hit folks, and they we know that folks experiencing vehicular homelessness are often newer to an experience of homelessness, and this is often the first stop before people end up in shelter. And so all that background to say that we don't anticipate the need for this type of service going away within 6 months. We're not going to solve it with $150,000 and a 6-month time frame. But and so, you know, even if you do propose for a 6-month time frame, being able to talk about, you know, what
comes next?
Yeah, what's the next step in that?
Perfect. Perfect. Thanks.
Those are some good questions. Thanks everybody for engaging. Someone's excited about the opportunity. Thanks, Linda. Any other questions? I mean, we have time. We can actually hang out here for a few minutes too, if people want to put some thought into it, and come back. Oh, Greg has a question. Gregory. Actually, it's not Gregory. Can you say any more about demonstrable site control? Is that a requirement?
So I was just looking for the language in the document where we speak to it, just so that way I could speak most informed. It is not a hard and fast requirement that you have to have site control, because again, we might have a proposed operation where, look, I don't have a piece of land to bring to bear, but I have this great program and I have the access to all the amenities needed, and I know how to staff it to help get outcomes for the folks we're serving if the city could just bring some property. So, we understand that may be the type of proposal that we receive. I think so. It's question 3, where we ask for your response and say, please describe if you have demonstrable site control for the use of a privately owned or leased site. So sometimes what we get in this conversation throughout the community is, there's this empty lot over here that's just been sitting there for years. And I really think if we could use that, that'd be the perfect place because it's got the hospital down the street. And so sometimes people come to the table with suggestions of what a private owner would do with their land and have never engaged with that private owner in a conversation about that. And then certainly don't have any formal agreement that would allow them to do that. And so I think we just ask for the expediency of the contract and of these services getting enacted in the community, that if you are proposing to do something on a privately owned or leased site, that you have those agreements in place, that you have, the confirmed ability to do those services on that land. So I see your follow-up question, a cooperative agreement that doesn't give full decision-making control over the program would work. Could you say more? I'm not sure if I understand that.
I can speak to it. Linda might be able to speak to it more completely, but just currently the hosts of some of the facilities that we have in other parts of the community, Denver Metro community, it's a church parking lot, so we don't lease it from them. We have a collaborative agreement with them. They're part of the partners that make decisions about the program and how it fits within that community and within that the specifics of that lot, and they have to meet certain requirements that we have, but we wouldn't have total legal, like we're not the sole decision maker, we're not. So that kind of a cooperative agreement on programming, as long as it's meeting our minimum requirements, is not necessarily a problem from your perspective.
Right. Yeah, I think those types of memorandums of understanding, operating agreements, cooperative agreements, all of that could be part of the documentation of your site control. We certainly don't mean to imply that you have to be in a lease or otherwise own the land, just that you have some basic agreement that you can be there and use it for this purpose.
And then Nancy has a question. She states that we are an inner city church. We would entertain only overnight parking, not 24-hour. The neighbors will want folks to leave. We anticipate some just moving cars to street. Any history of that issue in other settings?
So I don't have a response right now on whether there's any history of that issue coming up in other settings. So we may have to look into that and get back to you. I'm not sure that there's any documented history of that. In general, I think we do want, one of the questions is to help clarify for us whether your operational plan is for overnight only, or if it's for 24/7 operations, and if overnight only, kind of what's your in and out times, and how do you plan on, what if someone can't really move their car, if a car is unable to move, what do we do, those kinds of things. And so yeah, would like for you to explain that in your application. And then I think that that's probably also something to speak to in that neighborhood mitigation question about, if, like you said, picturing some of these church parking lots. I live in Golden Triangle, Cap Hill area, and the parking is so hard to come by on the street, and so you can guarantee there'd be some raised eyebrows if we have the same cars just moving out to the block every morning. But that's part of living in the city. So I think we just maybe think about how do we anticipate engaging the neighborhood around that.
Any other questions? I don't see any in the chat. Well, hopefully everybody feels comfortable with the responses that we provided today. Keep in mind that if any additional questions come up after we close this call, that you can also put them in the mailbox and we'll respond in writing to those. So once again, please go back to the web portal to see if anything's been added. And Nicole, in the end, I don't know, is there another slide after this?
There is not.
Okay, that's it. So with that, everyone, thank you so much for joining today. We really appreciate your time and the services that you provide to our community, and we look forward to your proposals.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good to see
everybody.
y'all.
Thanks.
You all have a good day.
Bye.